Hello and a very warm welcome to the Big Bright podcast. My name's Emma and today we're welcoming Melanie Burke from BrandStencil. A blurry logo here or a rogue typeface there can erode the strength of your brand identity, and it can be hard to keep track of what's coming and going. BrandStencil is on a mission to make the creation of brand documents easy and consistent, using intuitive formula that even the most design-averse user can use. With competition popping up in every industry, it's more important than ever to put the thought into developing a strong brand. Not only does it set you apart from others, but it also showcases what you stand for. Today, we're chatting to Melanie, co-founder of BrandStencil, a genius offering that allows companies to create branded comms docs at the click of a mouse, picking her brains on how to create a brilliant brand even on a budget. We met Melanie when we integrated our asset bank DAM with BrandStencil, and so far it's been a match made in tech heaven. Welcome, Melanie.
Hello.
Welcome to the Bright HQ.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. As a fellow Brightonian, seems only right to have you here.
Exactly, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your role at BrandStencil and what you guys offer?
Yeah, of course. So I'm co-founder at BrandStencil, and our product is for busy marketeers having one of two problems. They're either finding that they're completely overwhelmed with requests for artwork across their organisation, or they are allowing people to make their own artwork, but everyone's going completely off-brand and frankly making some fairly ugly designs. So what BrandStencil does is a software as a service platform. We create a suite of customisable templates that anyone across the organisation can use to create on-brand artwork in moments, never having to touch the marketing team's workload. So that's what our product does. Where we integrate with Asset Bank is that it's great when we come across an organisation that's already using Asset Bank because we know they're already thinking about how to manage their marketing assets. What BrandStencil does is it means that we integrate with the platform so that when you're making your artwork from a template, we integrate so you can directly collect any of the images that you want to use from your asset bank DAM.
Seamless.
Yeah, and it is seamless. They work perfectly together. And the end user doesn't even really know. They're not being told where they are or what they're doing. They're just getting access to the correct images that they're allowed to use right at the point they need to use them.
Amazing. So you guys focus on clients within the charity and not-for-profit sectors. So what was the thinking behind this and the focus?
BrandStencil is a product that's built by Electric Putty, which is also my company. We're a web development agency based in Hove. Way back, a long time ago, I used to work in the advice sector and then I moved into tech. And when I first started worked in tech, we worked with the charity and not-for-profit sector. Once we set up Electric Putty, that just continued. But also, there is something about working with organisations that have purpose. It's a great area to work in. And all of the people that work in that sector are really lovely and passionate about what they do. So it's sort of double win. However, with BrandStencil, we aren't just charity sector focused. We are working in other industries as well. And yeah, I can happily report that people in other sectors are really nice too.
Oh, that's good. What's the thinking behind the name Electric Putty, just out of interest?
So we set up the business, me and my husband. We were thinking about it when we were living in Sydney in Australia. And the whole idea, I mean, this shows how old we are and what our age is. The idea was about sort of interfaces. So what we were trying to do is differentiate ourselves from print agencies, people who are working primarily in print, to people working in this new media called the internet. And so we wanted to call ourselves Digital Putty because it was all about an interface and the sort of flexibility of the putty, creating the interface that you wanted. But Digital Putty had gone, the domain name, so we became Electric Putty.
I wonder how many companies have that they start off with one thing and then they have to kind of like tweak and keep finding, you type in the synonyms or something to Google.
We've been called Electric Potty and Electric Puppy over the years. So yeah, BrandStencil's a bit more of an obvious offering.
You've obviously been working with many brands over the years with BrandStencil. In your opinion, what makes a strong brand?
My focus on what makes a strong brand is around brand governance. And so that's about making sure that the effort and the resource that an organisation's put into their brand, into the brand positionings, into the brand values, in the messaging, as well as into the identity, are not lost in the ongoing brand execution. We have lots of organisations come to us who are either just gone through a rebrand or are just in the process of it. And the reason they want a templating system is that then they don't just giving people, here's our shiny new brand guidelines and no one knows what to do with them. So I think that many brands start out strong, but then it becomes diluted because of this issue around brand governance.
People come and go as well. You need to have that one ambassador of the brand. Is that what you mean by the governance? Having, someone that's your brand ambassador almost?
Brand governance is really all about the process of ensuring that brands remain consistent and cohesive. So a part of brand governance is the brand ambassador. It's also the brand guidelines. It could be the brand identity is part of that. The templates that you present, even if they're InDesign templates or in Word templates, that's all part of your how do you manage the execution of this brand. Editing guidelines, that could be part of the brand as well. The tone of voice is obviously a key part of that. But more than that, it's like we use these words, we don't use these words, or how we spell things. So all of that is brand governance. So I think what makes a brand strong is obviously there's that excitement at the beginning. Everyone's really excited. We got this new brand, it's great. But it's about how you then keep presenting that.
I think you notice that a lot on social media when you have different people talking from those platforms, and obviously it's kind of the brand, but you can really tell if they have their guidelines. And I know we always talk about people like Innocent, but they are the people that do that really well. They, no matter who's answering things, it's always in that same tone, and it might sound slightly different, but they wouldn't use certain words, and they have a sort of a jovial quality to their writing. So I think it's really important, and it can be quite jarring, especially I think sometimes brands have, a certain tone of voice for their like email marketing, and then you go to their website and it's completely different.
Yeah.
And you kind of think, well, that doesn't quite, match up. And I think having that really clear guidance, or even with like image guidelines and things, just across every part of your communication is really important.
Yeah. I think tone of voice is a really hard one, actually. A lot of people who don't work in the brand world, when they think of brand, they think, what does it look like?
Logo.
And they've forgotten about all of that stuff that goes with it. Mm-hmm. And what brand governance is doing is going, okay, we're going to make sure that we consistently present the right identity so that when you see it, you remember and have all those emotions that we want you to have about this brand. That personality comes across. So that's why I think that that's really important. The thing about tone of voice that makes it really hard is that often even with identity, so for example with a platform like ours, you're thinking about what does it look like, but somebody's still going to write the words in. We have found some ways around that where we allow people to choose from a drop down so they can have sort of key messages that the organisation has, or preset content which you can edit and change. And that's also about then educating people because they start seeing that content all of the time. But tone of voice is a real challenge because that's the kind of the bit that people put in themselves, although you can have approval processes and things which help with that too.
That's sort of the gap, isn't it? It's the human part of what you do.
Another thing around brand governance, it maybe isn't traditionally that, because governance is the kind of brand cop. People talk about the brand police, somebody who's wielding the truncheon and telling everyone what to do. But actually it's moved much more now into being about brand coaching. Part of your governance should be, how do we make sure that people understand what the brand's about?
That's interesting, because we did a podcast not long ago with Vic, who did the rebrand at Bright, and a lot of what she talks about is not being held hostage by your brand guidelines, not having too lengthy a brand guideline, because people will just look at it and be like, oh God, and like immediately shy away from it. So I guess it's having it simple enough that you can pick it up and it's very quick to get to where you need to get, but not feeling like you're trapped within it.
Exactly. And also giving people at the different layers or the different levels the right information. So often with our product, people like service managers using it. We work with Alzheimer's Society. If you're a service manager, you're running a dementia cafe, you need to be able to tell people when the dementia cafe is on. You're not a designer, you're not even a marketing person. You just need to be able to make something and get that thing out there so that people see it. So for those people, you don't even really need to explain it to them. They just get something that works. And then for others who are going to need to be more of your brand advocates, those are the ones that you give them the more in-depth guidelines. So the governance is around all of those different things, I think.
BrandStencil has probably been used many times now to create those sort of branded COVID regs for people, because they had to do that really quickly as well.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I suspect that people probably did just go, right, quick, Word doc, write it out, stick the logo on there and have it done. And I've seen quite a few things, like, because I walk around and I look and I think, oh, they've used something, or have they not, you know, how you do sort of bit of busman's holiday. Yeah, I think some of that does go out of the window in those more crisis situations, but actually that's where it's really important that it does look like this has come from the organisation itself.
Yeah.
So that's where brand governance is.
And it's always a nice surprise when you see something that has been branded. I always quite like it. And Platform, actually, the co-working space, do that really well. They always keep that tone of voice, no matter whether it's a broken tap or, you know, an event they've got on. And I think that's really clever. And that's a nice example of a brand being portrayed really well across all those mediums.
Yeah. So I think the last point on that around the brand governance is it can sort of directly affect your bottom line as well. Again, using an example of charities. For a charity, they need people to know what services they're providing in the community. So if you are running some sort of service that you're doing on behalf of a charity, and the charity can do that because it's been funded through donations, some services are provided through the local authority, but that charity needs people to know so that when they start doing their fundraising ask, there's a connection. They think, oh yeah, I see they do all these different things in the community. I recognise that brand and I know what they do. So I think that's also why sometimes brand can feel a bit nebulous and, I don't really understand why we need to do that. Why do we need to do that? You know, why does it matter that we don't just do a Word document with, you know, pink Comic Sans or something? And that's why, because you need that consistent and cohesiveness so that everyone recognises who you are and all the great stuff that you do.
Absolutely. So for those starting a new business, obviously there's loads to think about. And you talked about people kind of saying, you know, sometimes you think of a brand as being like a logo or something visual. What would you say would be the crucial branding first steps you'd recommend smaller companies or those with a smaller budget to invest in?
If you're a really small organisation, you're just starting out, it is probably those basic things. It is a good logo. It is what we've said before, a strong tone of voice. But really your tone of voice is going to come through thinking about your buyer personas. So it's kind of going back to basics, I think, and not just going, right, we need a logo, what's it going to look like? Because that's the sort of end part of that process. So actually probably spending your budget on understanding who you're communicating with.
A brand discovery session or something.
Yeah. And then you might not have as much budget left for the identity bit, but at least you've got some consistency and an understanding around what it is that you're doing. And then when you're ready to invest in that logo, you can then do that with this research that you've already done.
It's a lot easier to brief a designer or someone, isn't it, when you actually can say, this is the audience, this is, you know, who we're trying to hit, and this is what we don't like, this is what we do like.
Yeah, and you're going to end up with something that's more successful and probably has more longevity as well. You know, there's another side of it where you just think, well, don't worry about that too much at this point because you're probably doing lots of other things as well. But you do need people to recognise who you are. So if you are thinking about it from an identity perspective, then yeah, it is the logo that needs to be front and centre. So even if you're not creating other marketing material, you know you can put that logo on things and it's going to feel strong and it's going to connect people with your brand.
Which brands do you admire personally and why?
I can think of two that I really like. Well, there's three, but one of them is controversial. So one of them I love and I'm a bit of a brand fan is Monzo.
I love Monzo.
Yeah, they look great because you get your lovely pink card and people go, and not that I ever use a card anymore, but if I did, because I do everything on my phone, you've got a lovely bright pink card that just pops, so it looks great. But they've got such consistency across the whole brand. You know what you were saying before about everything, even the thing about the broken taps, got the correct tone of voice. It's really consistent. I feel like Monzo do that as well.
Yeah, even on the app, they just sometimes like even the pop-up stuff is just really well thought through, and it's a joy to use, and that's weird, isn't it, when you're talking about a banking app?
Exactly.
I mean, how have they made banking sexy? I don't know, but they have.
Yeah,
but it's like the cool thing to have a Monzo now.
And also, you know, people talk about disruptor brands and everything, which they are, because when you set up your account, I remember I had to make a video of myself. It's like,
which is really awkward,
really awkward, but really cool and different. That is totally disruptive. It's not, you need to get your birth certificate and your bank account, and you need to get all of your information, and somebody's going to, you go down, you fill in a massive form. It was just all different, and it was done really quickly. So that's kind of part of their process, I suppose. But it's all part of that brand feeling that you get when you think about them. You think that they're cool, you think they're disruptive, they look great. The other thing I think, and we've both went, I love Monzo, is that you feel like you're part of a community. And that's another thing around sort of brand governance, is that's really changing, is that what brands should be doing is creating a community of people who all become their brand advocates.
Well, that's the reason I got Monzo, because my friend Caroline would not stop going on about Monzo. It also was at the right time, like I was about to go abroad and she was like, have you got a Monzo? And this is why. Isn't that funny how she was the brand advocate and I probably wouldn't have downloaded it from any other way. So how are they doing that? It's really clever, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that we were talking about these different sort of levels of people who sort of managing the brand, and brand advocates are one of them. So what you're doing is trying to create that community of people who are all massive brand fans. And
that's the dream, isn't
and
it?
That's
for
the
any
dream.
Brand.
And then, and then it's funny because it does become less about that identity element. It is more about like-minded people who feel a connection with something. And then the second brand that I really like is Amnesty International. I mean, firstly, I do believe in what they're trying to do as well, so maybe that draws me in anyway. But it is an absolutely instantly recognisable global brand, and the kind of the yellow and the black and the white is what they use extensively. They have pink as well, actually.
Which is quite harsh colours in a way, aren't they? To have together. So I wonder where that came from. But it's a serious, they deal with serious subjects.
Yeah, my feeling is that, I haven't read this in their brand guidelines, is they're trying to sort of instill a sense of emergency in people as well. But they have recently gone through a kind of review of what their brand is. I think that happened around 2017. And they refocused that around people working together for a common cause. So creating this sort of global community of people who care about humanity and care about human rights. So again, it's that community thing that they've created, which is really effective.
Do you work with them with BrandStencil?
No.
You don't?
I'd love to though.
That'd be like an ideal client, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they'd be amazing. And also because they're global, so I think how they work is you've got Amnesty International, there's a sort of global organisation, but then each country is its own charity in itself as well. But they still manage to bring all of those different brands together. And when I've worked with global organisations before, people tend to, kind of go, we don't quite do things like that over here in South Africa. So trying to bring everyone under one brand but still have that local flavour is quite tricky.
Yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it?
So I looked at Amnesty International Australia the other day and the UK, and from an identity perspective they're really cohesive.
Do you think that tools such as BrandStencil will eventually kind of dispel the need for a designer, or can they exist hand in hand?
I feel really strongly about this, and I get asked about this a lot. BrandStencil is not a design tool, it's a productivity tool. It's to help marketing and design creative people to free up their time to do more creative tasks. Mm-hmm. It's not intended in any way to replace what designers do.
I guess it can't think of all the brand discovery behind it. It just puts the rules in place.
Exactly. We sometimes say it's tools, not rules. I don't need to know that when this is a quote from a service user, for example, to take an example for one of the brands we work with, that we need to use a different font. You just ask me a question, is this for a service user? And if I say yes, then the system automatically chooses the right font. Some of our kind of what we call product owners at our clients, they are the designers, because they're completely overwhelmed with really boring work. They don't want to be making a poster for a service or making a business card. They want to be freed up to work to the top of their game and do really creative stuff. So I see BrandStencil as a tool which gives people back time and allows them to do creative stuff. And what BrandStencil does is automate and distribute some of those lower level tasks.
So it's got the kind of the same aim really as Asset Bank, because Asset Bank's, the idea is to make it easier for designers and creatives to stop trawling through everything and trying to find the right image and trying to find the right font or the latest logo. And I think that's where obviously BrandStencil has a very similar aim. It's all about trying to give people back the time and stop getting dragged down in all the boring, like make a COVID regulation poster. No one wants to do that.
Exactly.
So if you can do that really quickly and it be on brand, then ace.
Yeah. Another kind of nice side effect is that it empowers everyone across the organisation as well, because they don't have to go to the marketing team or design team. Do you mind doing me a poster? Or it's like, great, I can do that myself. There's no back and forth of you spelt that wrong, or actually we've changed where this particular event is happening, because that person is empowered to do it themselves.
I love that.
Those two things go hand in hand. You're freeing up the time, you're empowering people, and also actually you're educating people about the brand because they're using it all the time. So it's definitely not a design tool, which sounds a bit weird, but it's
like a designer's best friend.
Yeah. Can I have that?
Yeah, you can have that for free, definitely. In terms of brand loyalty, I think that's a really interesting thing at the moment, because there's so many people that obviously don't have brand loyalty. They flip from one thing to the other to do with price. But do you have any tips? And I guess, do you believe in brand loyalty? And what are your tips for creating it or increasing it?
Yeah, I do really believe that people have brand loyalty. And I think if you look at some statistics, it will say that price does tend to be the thing that people make their choices on. I think it does depend on what the brand is, though.
I do
as well. For example, if you look at something like Oatly is much more expensive than cow's milk, probably 2 or 3 times the price in some instances.
Yeah.
But people will choose to buy it because of what they're buying into. And some of that is around veganism and environmental things, but some of it is also because they've managed to make their brand look cool and interesting, and this is the thing we should all be doing. So I don't think that people always make choices on price. I think they make choices on the quality of the product as well.
I was going to say, because Oatly for me is the best oat milk I've tried. I will pay more for better taste, but I wonder whether if there was a cheaper brand that did it, whether I'd still go for Oatly because I like their marketing.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe.
And obviously there's Oatly's all mired in lots of controversy at the moment around the Trump equity company that invested, and they've also invested in the Trump campaign. So it'll be interesting to see how they get around that. But I did buy a different oat milk in the supermarket the other day. It does taste as nice. So I wondered whether, when I went back, if I didn't have the issues around the kind of investment controversy, whether I would always stick with Oatly. I think the quality of the product as well, how good it is. And then the other side of that is also the customer experience. So it might be that the quality of the product isn't as great, but if you had a really good customer experience with them, then also you're happy to pay more for that, and you will be loyal to that brand because of it. So yeah, price is important. But I think experience that you give people through the brand, the customer experience.
I always think that with Waitrose. I mean, shopping in Waitrose it's like a nice experience. I always think like, I don't shop in Waitrose all the time, by the way. If I could, I would. And it's because I like everything from just like getting a space in the car park. It's just a more chilled environment. Everything kind of looks nice, and they've got a juice bar, and it's all that stuff. It's really clever that they've created that brand, but they've almost reversed that now because they're trying to become more mainstream. So they're trying to dial down, the sort of poshness of their brand.
Yeah.
And appeal to the more everyday shopper. But I think, like sometimes you just will pay for an experience, don't you?
I had to claim on my travel insurance. There was a big storm and they cancelled loads and loads of flights in the UK from Gatwick, and we ended up having to get 2 aeroplanes to get to our holidays. It's such first world problems here.
Where were you going?
We were going to Lanzarote.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up having, it's a very complicated journey to get there. And actually, on the way home, there was a sandstorm, but that didn't actually affect us.
No.
But we got out like the last plane out. So some people would have had both ends of their holiday disrupted. Anyway, I had insurance with LV, Liverpool Victoria.
There are other insurance companies
available.
We don't endorse.
Yeah.
LV.
And honestly, I had the best customer experience.
That's good because I'm with them as well.
So this was actually my second claim, and I rang them and said, this all happened and everything, and no one could get through for weeks because of COVID had then kicked in and the lockdown had happened. And I spoke to somebody and they were amazing. They were amazing. They didn't even ask me for evidence of all of my flights and everything. They just took it on value, which I've never heard of.
Yeah, with an insurance company.
And they said, well, because we're so, we've got so many calls coming in, we're just dealing with it quickly. And then when my next quote came, it was much higher. but I just stayed with them because I knew that if I ever needed to claim, it was going to be the same. It was going to be a good experience for me.
People will pay for that because we're time poor. If you've got experience and you know that you can trust them, and we all hear horror stories of cheap insurance companies that mess you around. So
to point out as well that all of this is based on being able to afford to make those price choices. So I'm in the position where I can afford to choose to pay more for something. Obviously, there's a lot of people that's not possible. So
there's different levels then of brand loyalty, isn't there? And maybe the sweet spot is creating that community where you do just feel really invested in the brand. And if you can afford it, you will pay for it.
Yeah, and you're getting something back as well. So I got something back from that experience, which was did have a monetary value.
So to finish off, what would you say is the most satisfying part of your role at BrandStencil?
I love working in tech. I've always loved it ever since I sort of got involved in working in web development. It was just interesting. You learn something new all the time. It's a fast-paced environment. Things are changing, so you never get bored, which I love. I also could call me nosy, but maybe curious. I love helping people solve problems. So I like to hear the issues that people are having and think about creative ways to help people solve those problems.
It's a very web developer-y kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Problem solvers.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's a really nice way those two sort of things come together, because there's always a way to do something with tech. But also, I mean, BrandStencil is a fairly new product, and I've really enjoyed learning about sort of moving from web development into building your own product and building a SaaS business and being able to have ideas around your product and then develop those ideas based on those problems that people have. So you can grow your own thing, whereas when you're in web development, which is also great, but you are helping people on their own products. So
yes, this is your baby.
It's your baby, yeah. And you can then have a good idea and you can then see that idea through to fruition. So it's really enjoyable.
Melanie, it's been so nice having you with us. I've learnt loads about brand and I thought I knew a bit about brand, but it's just been nice to hear your perception of it as well. And it's been a joy to have you in. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. My first podcast.
Oh, well, you're a natural.
Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for listening. Please remember to subscribe to ensure you never miss an episode. You can find out more top tips from the Bright team on our website at bright-interactive.co.uk.